The kingdom of Umonka was a realm of beauty and prosperity. It was a kingdom other kings looked up to, and rivers ran clear and plentiful. The king's palace, a towering structure of gold and marble, gleamed in the sunlight, its spires reaching towards the heavens as if in constant prayer. The people were happy, their lives peaceful and filled with celebration. From sunrise to sunset, the air echoed with the laughter of children, the hum of merchants, and the rhythmic beat of drums in the marketplace. It was a kingdom envied by many, and its rulers were revered as symbols of divine favor. Yet, not everything in Umonka was as perfect as it seemed. On the edge of the kingdom, where the cobblestone streets gave way to dirt paths and the cheerful chatter of the villagers faded into eerie silence, there lived a woman who embodied mystery and fear. Ndidi was her name, though no one dared to call her that. To the villagers, she was simply Ugly Mother. Her name was spoken in whispers, her presence was always avoided like a curse. Ndidi's house was an old, crumbling hut at the edge of the forest. Its thatched roof sagged under years of neglect, and the wooden door creaked ominously in the wind. Her garden, overrun with weeds, bore the remnants of a once thriving life. Chickens pecked half-heartedly at the ground, their clucks echoing in the emptiness that surrounded her. To the children of the village, her home was a place of horror, a setting for ghost stories shared in hushed tones by the fire. To the adults, it was a grim reminder of her supposed sins. Legend had it that Ndidi was a witch, a creature born to bring misfortune. The story was told and retold in the village square, embellished with each retelling. It was said that her husband had died under mysterious circumstances, his body found charred in the ruins of their home. Her infant son, Okizi, had been taken away by the gods, leaving her to wander the earth as a cursed soul. The villagers believed that her burnt face was a mark of her guilt, proof that she had angered the heavens. Some claimed that merely crossing her shadow would even bring 7 years of bad luck. The truth, however, was far more tragic. Ndidi's life had once been as bright as the noonday sun. She had been the wife of a kind farmer named Obiora, and together, they had built a life of love and laughter. Their son, Okizi, was supposed to be the light of their lives. She could imagine his laughter filling their home with joy. But all of that was snatched away in a single, cruel act of treachery. The fire had come on a warm summer night. The air had been thick with the scent of blooming flowers, and the village had been alive with the sound of drumming. The queen had took to bed earlier that week with Ndidi, and so the whole village was filled with merriment. Ndidi was lying down in her room with her newborn baby when the flames began to lick at the walls of her home. They had spread quickly, consuming everything in their path. She had screamed for Obiora, for Okizi, her son, but the smoke had choked her cries. By the time the villagers arrived, it was too late. The house was a smoldering ruin, and Ndidi was found unconscious, her body covered in burns. Obiora's charred remains were discovered in the rubble, but of Okizi, there was no trace. The villagers, blinded by fear and superstition, had turned on Ndidi. They claimed she had summoned the fire herself, that she had sacrificed her husband and child in some dark ritual. Her pleas of innocence fell on deaf ears. The elders declared her a witch, and she was dragged to the village square, where she was tied to a post and set ablaze. The flames licked at her skin, the pain searing through her body, but she did not die. Somehow, miraculously, the king had pity on her because of the happiness from his newborn baby, so the fire was subsided before it could consume her entirely. The villagers took it as a sign of her unholy powers, and from that day on, she was shunned, a pariah in her own land. But Ndidi knew the truth. The fire had not been an accident, nor the work of the gods or demons. It had been the work of someone from the village. Beautiful and cunning one, who could this be? Ndidi asked as she kept on crying. Someone could have orchestrated the fire, ensuring that no one stays alive in his family. But the question remains, who is this person? Meanwhile, unknown to everyone, that Okizi was taken from the ruins to be raised, and his true heritage hidden beneath layers of deceit. As the years passed, Ndidi bore her suffering in silence. She tended to her small garden, fed her chickens, and avoided the stares and whispers of the villagers. Her face, scarred and disfigured, became a mask she wore to shield herself from the world. But beneath the burns and the bitterness, her heart still ached for her son. She dreamed of him often, his laughter echoing in her mind like a distant melody. She held on to the hope that one day he would find her and know the truth. Little did she know that the day was closer than she could have imagined. Years later, in the palace of Omonka stood as a beacon of wealth and power. Its golden gates, adorned with intricate carvings of past rulers, shimmered in the sunlight. Inside, the halls echoed with the soft whispers of courtiers and the deliberate footsteps of servants. The throne room was the heart of the palace, its walls lined with tapestries depicting the kingdom's victories. At its center sat Prince Obina, draped in fine silks and jewels. Prince Obina was everything a future king was expected to be. Tall and broad-shouldered, with piercing eyes and a commanding presence, he was adored by the people of Monka. Wherever he went, cheers followed. He was often seen riding through the kingdom, his black steed cutting a majestic figure against the golden fields. The villagers believed him to be the embodiment of strength and fairness, but beneath the polished exterior was a young man grappling with invisible chains. Obina's upbringing in the palace was strict and controlled. The queen demanded perfection, leaving little room for mistakes or even genuine emotions. His father, the king, was distant, treating Obina more as an heir than as a son. The weight of expectations bore down on him, and though he carried it well, he often longed for something he couldn't name, something that felt like home. One fateful morning, seeking solace from the suffocating palace life, Obina ventured beyond the boundaries of the kingdom. He rode aimlessly, the forest quiet, a welcome contrast to the relentless noise of court life. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the path, and the only sound was the rhythmic clopping of his horse's hooves. It was here, in the heart of the forest, that he saw her. The so-called ugly mother. She was crouched beside a stream, struggling to haul up a bucket of water. Her frail frame and burnt skin caught his attention, and for a moment, he froze. He had heard of the ugly mother before, the stories whispered by servants and villagers. Seeing her now, he felt a pang of pity and curiosity. Dismounting his horse, he approached cautiously. "Let me help you," he said, his voice firm yet kind. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes, though tired and filled with pain, held a warm smile that Obina did not expect. She nodded, stepping aside as he pulled the bucket up with ease. "Thank you, my prince," she murmured. "You know who I am." "Everyone knows the prince," she replied softly, a faint smile playing on her lips. Something about her struck Obina as familiar, though he couldn't place it. For a fleeting moment, he felt a connection to her, like an invisible thread tying them together. But the moment passed, and duty called him back to the palace. That evening the queen summoned her son Prince Obina, so to discuss kingdom obligations with him, As they were conversing, he recounted the encounter to the queen. Her reaction was immediate and intense. Her usually composed demeanor cracked, and she warned him to stay away from the woman, claiming that she was dangerous. "She's a witch," the queen hissed. "She'll curse you if you get too close, and I don't want to lose my only son, please my prince." The queen also ordered the guard never to allow his son step foot into the forest of the ugly mother again, or she would have their heads. From that day on, Obinna avoided the forest and the woman he had briefly pitied. But what he didn't know was that their paths were destined to cross again. The palace was abuzz with preparations for the harvest festival, one of the kingdom's grandest celebrations. Obinna, eager to prove himself as a capable leader, took charge of the arrangements. On the morning of the festival, he decided to inspect the fields personally. He mounted his horse and rode out, his excitement masking the sense of foreboding that hung in the air. As he galloped through the fields, tragedy struck. His horse, startled by a snake, reared up violently, throwing Obinna to the ground. He landed with a sickening thud, and the world went black. The palace was torn into several parts when they realized that Obinna was not in his room. The queen almost took the life of his personal guards, but the king asked her to calm down. One of the maids in the palace, Edora, a girl Obinna loved so much and confided in, told the guards where to look for him, and they all left immediately. When he was found hours later, his body was broken, his breathing shallow. The festival was postponed indefinitely. He was rushed back to the palace, where the royal healers worked day and night tirelessly to save him. But their efforts were in vain. "He needs a blood transfusion," one of them said gravely. "Without it, he won't survive." The king immediately volunteered. The queen had gone to make her hair and prepare for the festival, but the king's blood didn't match. The healers tested the nobles, the guards, even the servants, but no one could save the prince. As the queen was not available at the moment, it was then that the healer hesitated before speaking again. "He might die tonight if nothing is done." Lots of tears in the palace, even louder than the day he was born. His body was getting cold so fast and he was losing his breath. His personal guards were thrown into the prison to be killed as soon as the prince died. "Get the queen back to the palace immediately," the king commanded and continued. "I am the king spoke up. "Can't we go out in search of the match? Even if it entails buying at all cost, I have the money." The healer responding, "Your Majesty, there won't be time for that. The prince needs to be treated immediately, in the next hour. I suggest we wait for the queen." When the queen returned and learned about the transfusion, she gave many excuses as she knows her blood won't match. Amidst the whole drama, the queen knows just exactly who she would meet for the blood, but she was still afraid until this time. She had confided with the healer to keep the process secret, and so she stood up and went straight to the prison and said to the guard in prison, "I want to give you just one opportunity to live again." They were glad to hear that, and the queen continued, "There is one more person we could try her blood," she said, her voice low. "But it would be discreet." The queen's heart raced as she continued. "The woman in the forest, ugly mother. Her blood might match. I want you to go and get her blood whichever way possible for my son, then I will give you your freedom." The queen's decrees were law, so they rushed to the forest immediately. Meanwhile, the king had given a decree to bless anyone who finds a solution to his son's illness. Under the cover of darkness, the queen had sent guards to the edge of the forest. Didi was taken from her home without explanation, her protest silenced by the threat of violence. She was taken to a secret chamber in the palace, where the guards performed the transfusion. As the procedure began, Nidi's body trembled from the strain. Her blood, though a perfect match for Obina, was being taken in a way that left her weak and fragile. She felt her life slipping away but didn't resist. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt a deep, instinctual need to save the prince. When the transfusion was complete, and the blood taken to the prince, but Nidi was left on the cold floor, her strength nearly gone. It was past midnight. The queen ordered her to be taken back to the forest, ensuring that no one would learn of her involvement. Obina began to stir, his life restored. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One of the healers who had overseen the procedure grew suspicious of the queen's secrecy and could not hold it back. Driven by a sense of duty, he reported the events to the village council. The investigation that followed uncovered the truth about the transfusion and the queen's lies. The healer identified Nidi's blood as the source of Obina's recovery, and the council demanded answers. When the queen was summoned, she tried to maintain her composure, but the mounting evidence left her no choice but to confess. The room fell silent. The king looked puzzled, but the queen's face turned ashen. She realized that the web of lies she had spun for years was beginning to unravel. But with her son's life hanging in the balance, she had no choice. The queen confessed, "Years ago, when the king divorced his first wife to marry me, I was so anxious to give the king a son who would be the heir to the throne. I had no evil intentions at all. After 3 years of childlessness, I became more anxious, but the king was calm and showered his love on me, but I only told myself not to get head over it, that it might not last. But after a few months, I took in for the king, I believe same time with Nidi. I was more happy when the healer told me it would be a boy, so I tried everything to keep him. After 9 months, I went for my delivery, and the journey was easy and simple. I heard my baby's cry, and when I held him I was overjoyed that I had to send words to the king immediately and inform him at midnight. The king, filled with happiness, decided to see me first thing tomorrow, but that was when the crisis began. After 2 hours of delivery, my baby could not move nor breathe. The healers tried their best, but all I could only hear that your son was gone. I cried deep into my heart. I couldn't bear it, and I asked myself how the king would feel. That was when I learned of Nidi's newborn son, Okizi. Something inside her snapped. The sight of the baby boy in Nidi's arms, his laughter ringing out like a song, had awakened a dangerous envy. I wanted him as a replacement, not just as a child, but as a symbol of her unassailable power. A prince would secure her position as queen and silence her critics. But Nidi's refusal to give him up was a blow to my pride, one that I could not forgive. I pleaded with her to give her all she wanted in life, but she was bent on making her husband happy. A king must be happy before his subjects are happy. The plan I devised was as cruel as it was cunning. I made sure the king didn't come to the healer's place again, and I paid for Nidi's bill so that she could go home. Then I hired mercenaries to set Nidi's home ablaze, ensuring that the fire would spread quickly. I instructed them to make it look like an accident, a tragedy of fate. My orders were clear: leave no witnesses. But even the most carefully laid plans can unravel. The mercenaries had failed to kill Nidi, and Okizi had been taken before anyone could question his disappearance. The queen had spun a tale of witchcraft, claiming that Nidi was a witch and had killed her husband and son. The king, blind to her deceit, and the villagers, too afraid to confront her, accepted the story without question. For years, my secret had remained buried, my crime hidden beneath layers of lies. I had everything I wanted: a throne, a son, and the adoration of the people. But my conscience was not as silent as I had hoped. At night, when the palace was quiet and the moon cast its silver light on the walls, I would see Needy's face in her dreams, her scarred features a haunting reminder of the life I had destroyed. I was afraid of discovery. So I made sure that no one in the village dared to approach Needy. I spread new rumors about the ugly mother, claiming that her powers had grown more dangerous, that she could summon storms and curse crops with a glance. I paid the elders to reinforce the stories, and the youth to burn her, ensuring that Needy remained an outcast. But even in her isolation, Needy's spirit refused to break. She carried the weight of her tragedy with quiet strength, her hope for justice a flame that refused to be extinguished. And though I had silenced the truth for years, the arrival of fate was inevitable, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Before the entire court, she admitted to orchestrating the fire, abducting Okizi, and spreading lies about Needy. His name is not Obina, he is Okizi, Needy's son. The prince was shocked hearing the confession. The revelation sent shockwaves through the kingdom. The prince, now fully recovered, was devastated. He realized that the woman he had scorned and avoided was his mother. The weight of guilt and regret crushed him, but he knew he had to make amends. The prince sought out Needy, but the king stopped him and ordered the guards to rescue her. They found her body weak but alive. They brought her back to the palace. The prince knelt before her, tears streaming down his face. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice breaking. Needy, though frail, managed a smile. "It was never your fault, my son, you were always mine," she said softly, her hand trembling as it touched his face. Needy passed away that evening, her sacrifice and suffering finally at an end. The kingdom mourned her loss, and the prince vowed to honor her memory. The queen was stripped of her title and imprisoned along with the elders, her crimes exposed for all to see. The prince decided to leave for his biological family, but the king stopped him and promised him that he could rule the kingdom with his father's name. After many years, when the king died, Okizi ascended to the throne with his family's name, bringing royalty to his family. He ruled as a just and compassionate ruler. He transformed Omonka into a kingdom where truth and justice prevailed, dedicating his reign to the memory of the woman who had given everything for him. The legend of the ugly mother became a story of redemption, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and truth can shine through. Legend of the Ugly Mother.